What is up, you guys? This is JP here, and this is the next episode of the Exercise Science Podcast. In this episode, I'm going to go over volume in regards to working out. I mention it a lot in my videos, and you may see it a lot. For those of you who want to make gains, you want to make optimal gains in strength, you want to make optimal gains in hypertrophy. If you're not working with a coach and you're just doing your own workout program, I'm not saying that you have to understand volume to a very advanced extent. You don't. And when you really think about it, volume, depending on like how you're talking about it, isn't really a super hard concept to understand. But I think that if you really want to maximize your gains in the gym, that you need to understand volume somewhat. You should get the concept of volume. Now, someone could argue that, some people don't have time for that. They don't have, they're too busy. You could just simply follow a workout program, and if you follow a good program, then you'll make gains, and you don't have to. That's wrong advice. Well, no, I kind of disagree. I think that it is a good idea to understand training volume, because let's first start with this: is that if you want to make gains, anyone who steps into the gym wants to make gains. They want to get stronger. They want to gain muscle. Even women who say, I don't want to get bulky, I just want to get lean. Essentially, they still want to gain muscle. They just want to lose fat and gain muscle. And then when they do that, they'll look leaner. So everyone who wants to go into the gym wants to make gains. But the thing is that no one wants to plateau. Nobody does. So nobody wants to plateau. We want to continue to make progress, and then if we stop making progress, it can leave us frustrated. It can leave us pissed off. And if you're just following random workouts on the internet and you don't know why you're not, if you don't know why you've hit a plateau, then that's where maybe not understanding training volume can hurt you in the long run if you don't kind of understand the concept. So let's just say your goals are to get stronger. We all know that if you want to get stronger, and if you don't know, I'll explain it here, you have to lift heavy weights sometime in your training. Strength is it's tied to specificity very closely. So basically, if you want to get stronger, you could have good technique, you could have lots of things, but if you're not lifting heavy weight at some point in your training, like let's just say you never go below 8 reps, you're going 10 reps or higher all the time, you're going to be leaving a lot of gains on the table. Someone could be training, one day they have 10 reps, and then another day they're training in the 6 to 8 rep range, or the 4 to 6 rep range. That individual is going to have a much greater success in comparison to themselves getting stronger because of the principle of specificity. So if you want to get stronger, you need to lift heavy shit. It's plain and simple. Now, if you want to gain muscle, if you want to gain muscle, you need to have a proper stimulus first. Gaining muscle is different from getting stronger. They're different. They do affect each other, but they're different. So if you want to gain muscle, you either need to lift heavy loads, moderately heavy loads, relatively close to failure, or light loads really close to failure, if not to failure. So those are the three major stimuli. You can even group up moderately heavy loads and heavy loads into one group, but that would be a little bit misleading, but you can. So you could just moderately heavy loads relatively close to failure. So like that, when I say moderately heavy, I mean that middle rep range, that like 7 to 15 rep range. You need to kind of get relatively close to failure. You don't have to go to failure, just within, 5 reps of failure typically. If you're like 6+ reps away from failure consistently, I would argue that you're definitely leaving gains on the table. And if you're training heavy in the low rep range, since it's heavy weight, you automatically should be within 5 reps from failure the second you lift the first rep because it's heavy. And light loads, the science is pretty clear on this. You have to train to failure, or you have to get very close to failure, depending on how many reps you're going. Like some people say consider 16 to 20 light reps, but like 16 to 20, you probably don't need to go to failure, but you need to get really close. But if you start like going 20, 25, 30 reps sets, just for like a crazy pump or something, you definitely do need to go to failure if you want to optimize gains. Now, hypertrophy, once you have that proper stimulus, what do you do? Okay, it's like, do I do one heavy rep? Do one set? And that's where volume comes in. And the volume affects hypertrophy and strength. Volume simply means, for those of you who just get confused, volume just means how much you do in the gym. How much? Just how long is your workout? How much do you do? How many reps do you do? How many sets do you do? All that. And you may say, well, that's pretty vague. How much do I do in the gym? Like, do I count inches I've moved the weight? Do I count just the sets? Do I count the reps? Do I just count the weight that I do, how do you calculate it? And this has been a topic of contention for a while in the scientific literature. Most of the time they use volume load. They go by volume load, and that's one method of tracking volume. Is volume load is just reps times sets times weight. So if someone does 100 pounds on bench press for 10 reps, that'd be 100 pounds times 10, which would be 1,000 pounds. And then you multiply that 1,000 pounds times how many sets you did. So if you did 3 sets, that would be 3,000 pounds total volume load. Then another method of tracking volume would just be to count the number of sets that you do. Just ignore the numbers, just the amount of sets that you do. And even more specifically would be the amount of hard sets that you do. And that's what I'm about to talk about in a little bit. And then there's other ways that people calculate volume, which I've been looking up recently, and I've heard, and I've seen some people say it, but again, I've asked Mike Zordos about this question, and the people of MASS, which I'll go over in a little bit. MASS is just a research review that I read. Basically, a research review is a group of individuals that cover studies, and the individuals, in particular, for this research review, MASS is Mike Zordos, Greg Nuckols, and Eric Helms. They go over studies, and then they review the studies and tell you what the studies say and what can I take away from those studies. So they kind of simplify it for people who aren't, exercise science PhDs or anything like that. But in this research review, is what I'm going to go over is that's one thing. Like, that's another way to calculate volume, is that I have asked Eric Helms and Mike Zordos and Greg Nuckols and all the other members of MASS what they thought about counting stimulating reps as in volume. So for example, if you're doing a set, you may have heard this. I think Omar Isuf, if you guys followed him, I think he actually did a video on this as well. But when you do a set, like let's just say let's go back to the bench press example. If you do a set to failure, let's just say you did 100 pounds. I'm just doing this for the sake of easy numbers. I know this is lightweight, but if you did 100 pounds and you did 10 reps and that was to failure, those last reps from failure are the stimulating reps that actually cause muscle growth. So, for example, if I took that same amount of weight and did bench press again, and 10 reps is my 10 reps is the most I could do with 100 pounds. So that 100 pounds is my 10 rep max. If I didn't do 10 reps, if I did 5 reps, some would say that because I didn't get close to failure, that I didn't do the reps required for to see a hypertrophic stimulus. I just did the first reps, which were the easy reps, which aren't the stimulating reps, which aren't growth. So that's another way that some people calculate volume, is they don't count sets, they don't count volume load, they count the number of stimulating reps. So the reps that are essentially, to simplify this, the reps that are close to failure. And how many reps count that are close to failure? I've read an article, and this is what spawned my question to the MASS members group, was he said that it's roughly around 5 reps. The last 5 reps from failure count as they are the stimulating reps, and those are the reps that only count towards optimizing that hypertrophic stimulus and making gains. If you're further than 5 reps, those reps essentially are almost, for the sake of making this simple, they don't do anything, or they do very little. And that's another way of calculating volume. But what I'm trying to get at is that there are multiple ways to count volume, or to measure volume for your workouts, and volume itself dictates the magnitude of adaptation. However you want to count it, the more you do in the gym, that is directly tied. It's a dose-response relationship with volume and strength, and volume and hypertrophy. It's not as much with strength. It's there though, but it's not as much as it is with hypertrophy. Hypertrophy has a very strong relationship with volume, in the sense that if you're not doing an absurd amount of volume already, the more that you do, the more gains you're going to make. Now, some of you may nitpick, and of course, I can come up with a situation where adding more volume is not good. If I take someone and have them do 50 sets of bicep curls for their first workout, they're probably going to hurt themselves, and they may make no gains at all. They might just have a ton of inflammation. Something bad might happen to the point where they just end up in a hole and they make no gains at all. Of course, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying if you intelligently implement increases in volume, when you do increase volume, if everything else is controlled and good, sleep's good, protein intake's good, that you're going to make more gains. So when you do more in the gym, you make more gains. And this goes back to my original point at the beginning, was for people who want to make optimal gains and they hit a plateau, if you're like, well, I don't know why I'm hitting a plateau. I've been following these random workouts I found on bodybuilding.com, and for some reason, I don't feel like my physique's getting better, or I'm still staying the same strength. What's wrong? If you aren't thinking about volume at all, if you're just completely ignoring volume, then you're not really. What if like you hopped from one program to another, and you didn't realize that this new program actually has you doing less volume? If you go from more volume to less volume, and everything else is pretty constant, how you train and range of motion is the same, and there's no other like crazy changed factors, then you could actually have some detraining going on there. Your physique could get a little worse. Your strength might drop off a little bit, or it might just be maintaining the same, which was why you might have hit a plateau. So essentially, you want to, over your training career, you want to do more in the gym. And again, this could be with volume load is probably a really good way to do it, but I'm going to talk about the measuring sets in a little bit. And there was an article in Mass, the research review I just mentioned, and Mike Zordos covered this one, and it goes over, and the title is, can you simply count the number of sets to quantify volume? Because there's a lot of, like, again, volume load, when you do volume load, sets times reps times weight, that can be a little bit complicated, and it could be a little time consuming for most people. You know, calculating volume every single time you think about it. I still think that's a good way to calculate volume in the sense of, like, if you just count hard sets, you may think that your volume is not going up if you get stronger, which I'd argue that it is. Like, for example, if you have one hard set of 8 reps on squat, and then a year later you have one hard set of 8 reps on squat. If I said sets, I meant reps. But if you have one whatever X amount of sets, 3 sets and 3 sets, and then you had 8 reps on each set of squats, and then you do, and those are a year apart, you may think, wow, I'm still doing 3 sets of squats, and they're still both hard sets, and I was doing the same thing last year. I haven't increased in volume. Which, if you think about it like that, you haven't increased in volume. But if you've gone up in weight, you've gone up in volume. I'd argue that too. So you have to keep that in mind as well, that when you have more weight on the bar, or you're moving more weight, and you're doing the same amount of reps, you're doing more volume too. So the article that I was talking about says, can you simply count the number of sets to quantify volume? Again, I'm not going to try to do this word for word too much. I think that you guys should definitely look at Mass and get it if you want. I'm not trying to, it's Mass. It's a really good research review for people who like following studies and staying up to date. It keeps you up to date. It removes all that crazy scientific jargon, and they do a really good job over there at Mass. So, and I'm not tied to them. I don't get any cut or anything like that. I'm just generally, I like it. So, but I'm probably going to go over a little bit here and there of Mass, because I think it's good and it comes with a lot of knowledge. But the title of this one was, can you simply count the number of sets to quantify volume? Instead of doing all these other complicated methods, stimulating reps and volume load and whatever else someone wants to count as volume, I'm not sure of other ways. This study basically just said that instead of doing all those complicated ways, can we just say, is this a hard set, and can it count as, okay, can you start counting volume like that? I did 5 hard sets on chest. That's 5 for volume. It's a weird arbitrary number, but you could say, I have 5 hard sets for chest on volume. And just keep it simple, just like that. Basically, they're saying if this study, or this systematic review, it looked at 14 studies, and it said, can we do that? And if doing that, does that hurt gains? Is that because we're not being as specific as volume load or stimulating reps? Can we, will that hurt our gains if we just start counting the number of hard sets? And what happened was the conclusions determined that counting the number of sets can accurately quantify volume and predict hypertrophy outcomes. So if I just count the number of sets that I do, that can accurately determine hypertrophy. So for example, if you were doing 3 sets on bench press and you were like, okay, well, my physique's stalling, I don't know where to go, and you aren't doing too much other chest work, let's just assume you're doing a reasonable amount of chest work, and your chest growth is stalling. Now, what this systematic review says, that if you just add another set, okay, I'm not going to start counting all my weight and volume load and making it complicated. If I just add one more set to my bench press, or add another set, that I'm going to get a little bit more increase in hypertrophic gains. I'm going to make more gains. I'm going to get bigger muscles from that stimulus by just adding another hard set. That's as simple as that. Now, there is a small caveat, though, is that it says, the study did say that the review, because it was a systematic review of 14 studies, concluded that the number of reps per set should be at least 6, and each set should conclude 3 reps or fewer from failure to be included in the set count. Which some of you already might have been thinking this while I was talking about it. So you might have said, well, I can count any set. Yeah, and I did say hard set. So that's being a little bit more specific. Is that by hard set, I mean you need to be within 3 reps of failure, or it has to be an RPE of 7 or higher for those of you who like using RPE, and I've talked about that before. So, and it also has to be greater than 6 reps. The reason probably why is that if you start counting, for example, if you just took what I said and ran with it, if you said, okay, you said it has to be a hard set and it has to be within 3 reps from failure. So I can just do heavy, if I could take my 3 rep max, if I just did singles of my 3 rep max and counted one single as one set, you're telling me I'm going to make maximum gains and I can count it like that? No, because again, one single rep is just not enough to get an optimized hypertrophic stimulus, which is what the systematic review went over, is that for you to have, for your set, to make it simple, for your set to count as a hard set, and for you to keep it simple like that, it has to be, the set has to have at least 6 reps in it, and it has to be within 3 reps of failure. If your set follows those 2 caveats, it's relatively hard, which relatively hard, aka means it's the same thing as saying within 3 reps of failure. The set should start to feel hard when you stop. Like, oh crap, the bar starts to slow down a little bit, or your whatever rep, it starts to slow down. It becomes a little grindy. Or within 3 reps of failure if you like being more specific and accurate. Because if you know how to do reps in reserve, and you know, if you can trust yourself with using an RPE based on reps and reserve scale, then I would definitely do that. If you're a new lifter, you might not be able to accurately do it as accurately as an experienced lifter. But for those of you who don't understand RPE or don't know what that is, just take the set to I'll say this for 2 different ways for people who might want it the more accurate way. For those of you who don't know RPE, if you're just confused right now, what I'm trying to say is that if you want to count sets, just count sets as volume, count sets like that. Okay, well, if I'm stalling on chest and I'm doing 3 sets on bench press, if I go from 3 sets to 4 sets, that's increasing volume. Now, for that 4 set to count, though, as a hard set and count it towards your volume total, it has to have at least 6 reps and it has to be hard. You don't have to take it to failure, but it should be kind of close to failure. So if it doesn't meet those standards, if it's below 6 reps for that set, that 4th set that you added, or it's not within 3 reps from failure, you can't count it because it's just not, the stimulus is not hard enough. The stimulus that you're applying to that muscle, that set as a stimulus, is just not enough. And if it's not enough, because think about it, that makes sense. So what if I just unrack the bar, do 1 rep of the bar and rack it and say, okay, that's my 4th set. Can I count that as volume? No, it's just not enough. That's not hard enough. If that counted as volume, walking around would count as volume for legs. So now for the people who want it to be a little bit more specific, is the reps is going to stay the same. You have to have at least 6 reps for it to count as a hypertrophic stimulating set. But it also has to be an RPE of 7 or higher for those of you who like that. So that's a little bit more specific. So what I'm trying to say is that's a way that you can calculate volume if you're someone who doesn't understand volume that much. It's just to add sets. So to go back to the general concept of volume again, is over your training career, you want to increase volume. You just do. If you don't increase training volume over your career, and I mean over your long-term training career, you're going to hit a plateau at some point. And there is going to be a point of diminishing returns. You may be thinking, well, do I just keep increasing volume for years? Do I keep adding sets for years and years to the point where I'm doing 50, 100 sets on one muscle group a week? No, that's not what I'm saying. There's going to be a point where you're not going to be able to keep adding sets just due to time, due to you being a human being. And there's going to be a point where that even if you have the time, that just adding sets is not going to be a good idea. And that's different for everybody. Some people, I think there was, I don't know if it was a meta-analysis or a study from Brad Schoenfield recently, and I don't know if he did it or he was reviewing it. My friend sent it to me though, but basically they were saying that like some people can handle upwards to 40-something sets per muscle group per week and still see a positive result from that, from those amount of sets, still see gains, and that's getting them more gains by doing that much. Now, that's not for everybody. Some people don't respond that way, but it did say that, and I can believe that. Some people probably can, if they work up to that over years and years of training, and they have the genetics for it and it fits them. Some people just can't handle that much volume. I personally, I feel like I've always been someone that can handle volume. Like, I know some people who can't handle that much quote unquote high volume work. Like, their high volume work gets them real beat up, and I don't know. I've always been able to handle high volume for me personally, and I think it's weird. This is completely anecdotal, and I could be 100 billion% wrong on this. But maybe it's tied to like my cardiovascular capacity, like my cardiovascular fitness. I've always been good with cardio and not the best with lifting weights in regard to genetics. Like, I'm not very strong. But I think that because my cardio has always been pretty good, that I don't get fatigued from the sets. Like, if I get a decent rest period, I can just keep doing sets. But back on the track, and what I was saying is that you want to be able to increase your training volume over your career, because that's going to increase the magnitude of adaptation that you have. And that can be in adding sets. If you're not already at a point where you're doing too many sets, that can be in adding weight, because if you add weight and you're doing the same amount of sets and reps, then you're going to have more volume. And that can also be in adding reps. And this is why that middle rep range, 7 to 15 reps, is a good rep range to accumulate volume. Because when you start going below 6 reps, you're not doing that much weight. You're not doing that many. You're doing so little reps that even though you're lifting heavy weight for each rep, it's just not enough to add to your volume total. And you can do a lot of reps with low weight to match the volume of like those middle rep ranges. Think about it like this. Back to my other example. If you're doing bench press for 100 pounds for 10 reps, that's 1,000 pounds. And if you're doing that for 3 sets, that's going to be 3,000 pounds for that exercise and that workout. That's if you're using volume load to calculate volume. I'm just doing that for this example to show you guys. Now, let's just say if that's your 10 rep max, then you could, I don't know what the number would be off the top of my head, but you could possibly do maybe, let's just say your 3 rep max is 150. Now, let's just say you're doing, for the sake of it, let's just say you're doing 140 for 3 reps. Because obviously you can't do your 3 rep max every time. Or let's just say we'll keep, because I think I did that with the 10 rep. Let's just say you're doing 150 and that's your 3 rep max. Okay, if you're doing 150 and you're doing it for 3 reps, 150 times 3 would be 450. Just 450 pounds. Then if you multiply 450 pounds by 3 sets, that would be 1,500 pounds. Less than 1,350 pounds total volume. So think about it. You're doing less than half the volume than you did with that 10 rep max. Less than half the volume. Now, again, some people may say calculating volume using volume load is not the same, but I feel like that's a good indicator if you're taking the sets relatively close to failure. But think about it. That same setup right there, you're getting less volume. If we wanted to equate volume between those 2 examples right there, you'd have to do more sets with that 3 reps. You can't do more reps, because then you have to lower the weight. I'm trying to keep the weight the same. If you're trying to do, like we're talking about, if you did heavy work. If we did the second example of the 3 reps at 150 pounds, we'd have to do 6 sets to keep volume the same. Now, 6 sets with that heavy weight is going to beat you up a lot. Trust me. Anyone who does strength training, if you do 3 sets at something that's real heavy, 6 sets at something that's real heavy versus 3 sets of your 10 rep max. The 10 rep max might make you feel winded, but it's not going to beat you up as much. And to make this even a better example is that with that 7 to 15 rep range, you don't even have to go to failure. You don't have to go to failure on the heavy weight either, but the thing is, a heavy weight is still a heavy weight, and if it's heavy, it's going to be closer to failure than your 7 to 15 rep range. Your 7 to 15 rep range, you can kind of make a little bit further from failure than your heavy work, and you can still rack up that volume easier. It's a lot less fatiguing. So which route would you rather take if you're trying to maximize the amount of volume you can get? A bunch of hard, grindy sets, or less sets, and those sets are also less grindy, and you get the same hypertrophic response to that? I'd take the second example. Easy. Why work harder on purpose and beat yourself up when you could just work smarter? Now, heavy weight still has its place, because you got to think about, remember at the beginning, strength and specificity. So it all ties in together, but ultimately, what I'm saying is that you need to kind of sum up this whole episode, is that you need to pay attention to volume, and you can count hard sets that have at least 6 reps in them and that are at an RP of 7 or higher. You can just count sets like that as volume. I have five sets on chest for this workout, and that's my volume for this chest. And I have another workout this week that's chest, and I have another hard 5 sets there. That's 10 sets per week, which is good. That's what the scientific literature says. You need at least 10 plus sets per week per muscle group to start seeing those optimal gains, and you can work up from there as your training age increases and you can handle more. But you can calculate volume like that just simply by counting the hard sets that have 6 plus reps, and then so you can count it like that if you want to simplify things, or you can count it with volume load. I still think that those tenets should be there though. But also too, to sum up the other point is that just make sure you're aware of training volume and that it should increase over your training career if you want to make more gains. If you're doing less work in the gym and nothing else is changing, you don't have like larger ranges of motion or some other thing that's making it harder, if it's staying the same and you're just doing less in the gym, you could see a negative result from that. So if you're hopping from workout to workout in your and you're doing workouts online, you're just hopping from workout to workout and you're not seeing results and you're hitting plateaus, that might be why. And that's why getting on an intelligent program can help you. I think if a good trainer is going to be very, very, very valuable, and a bad trainer is going to be literally wasting you all your money. A bad trainer is essentially going to give you a workout that you can find online. A good trainer is going to give you a workout that you honestly, because if you're not a trainer yourself, that you couldn't do yourself. It should be something that you can't do, because if you could do it, then if you could just get it for free online, then why don't you just get it for free online? So that's where, again, you need to pay attention to that, and you need to pay attention to volume in the long run, because if you're not aware of how much you're doing in the gym a little bit, and let's just say you're 100% unaware of how much you're doing in the gym compared to how much you were doing 3 months ago compared to how much you might be doing in the future, then you don't know if you're making more and more of an adaptation. You don't know if you're putting a greater magnitude of stress on you to make those adaptations to be able to make more gains. Plain and simple. And if you don't know, how can you really count on your workouts? How do you know? Why are you even in the gym at that point? I'd argue. I'm not saying don't go to the gym. I'm just saying, to me, that would frustrate me and it would confuse me. If I don't know I'm making gains, if I'm going in there knowing that I might be actually detraining because I'm not at least knowing how much I'm doing, then I would be a little frustrating. And that's one of the main points I'm trying to bring up here, is that to simply know how much you're doing is just count your hard sets that have at least 6 reps in them. And if you're doing more of that, then you're going to be making more gains. If you guys have any questions, comments, you can leave them down below. I feel like I was all over the place in this episode, but it could be a little bit of a confusing topic. Again, I really recommend you guys check out Mass. Like I always post at the beginning of my videos, if you guys want training, you want to get ready for the New Year's, you guys want to get a good online workout program, you can message me here. You can go to my website, jpfitnesspro.com/coaching. Again, that's jpfitnesspro.com/coaching. We can get you on an intelligent workout program and get you to reach your goals together. Young questions, comments, leave them down below. I'll see you guys in the next video.